am the melanin man. Look at me and you'll understand. I am the melanin man. I come from the melanin land. I absorb the light. I am the darkness in your night. The way I dance, you see, it's just the melanin in me.
And a special good afternoon to my beautiful African brothers and sisters, those of you in the studio and those at home in the viewing audience. This section of the program has to do with drugs. Drugs is much a part of the discussion in the African community from coast to coast and really around the world. I would call to your attention something that's fresh on your mind, and that is some sisters from Nigeria just got busted in the last couple of days having to do with an investigation that had gone on for several months. But the thing that I want to call to your attention about this particular drug bust is that these Nigerian sisters previously worked for some people in the mafiosa, and they worked in there several years and nothing ever happened to them. But when they went out on their own, they got busted. What does that tell you about drugs and who's in charge of running drugs? You see, if you're familiar with Arkansas and familiar with the fact that Ali North and that group, along with the CIA, ran drugs out of Mena, into Mena, for the Contras for years, and flooded basically black communities with crack cocaine. Now everybody in the studio audience, except for one very young lady, is old enough to know that for many, many years that you had drugs in the black community, but you didn't have any crack. Crack is a new phenomenon. But crack is a kind of a drug that makes young ladies walk off from their children. I know I'm working on several cases where that the young lady has just walked off from her children. And grandmothers, aunts, and in one case, a grandfather is taking care of the kids, those that DCFS hasn't taken away and sent God knows where. We're going to try to make a point about drugs and why we as a community have got to deal with trying to solve the problem. And all problems can be solved once you know what the ingredients are involved in the problem. And one of the biggest ingredients involved in drug use and drug selling in the black community is the absence of a viable economic base. If you had a viable economic base, you might occasionally have somebody doing drugs. You know, rich people do drugs, but they can afford to do drugs. But somebody who is unemployed and unemployable, they can't afford to do drugs, because drugs cost anywhere from $50 to $100, in some cases $300 or $400 a day. Now, if you are unemployed, your mama is unemployed, your daddy is unemployed, where are you going to get $50, $75, or $100 a day so that you can entertain your drug habit? Well, you better think about that, because therein is the major problem. Data from Washington tells you that white people are the biggest users, the biggest sellers, the biggest promoters of the drug culture. Yet very few, I visit penitentiaries, and you find very few white people in the penitentiary because of drugs. But when I go to Dwight or to Joliet or to any of the federal prisons, and I've done them from coast to coast, that you find 90 to 95% of the blacks in the prison are there because of drugs. And they constitute roughly 70% of the people incarcerated. Now think of that. Think of a group that's anywhere from 12 to 20%. Mark and I, one of the major domos in doing this show, he and I talk about the fact that he says that there are 25% blacks in this country. I say it's anywhere from 15 to 20%. It doesn't matter which figure you use. What matters is that you understand that somehow you're getting abused even as you talk about drugs. Now, I don't know anybody who's for the use of drugs. I certainly am against any form of drugs. I never had a reefer in my hand or a needle in my arm or any of the other kinds of drugs. Don't drink alcohol and don't smoke cigarettes. But that doesn't have anything to do with it. That doesn't make somebody who does do any or all of those things a bad person. There are plenty of people in the movies, people in the White House, people in the major corporations who do drugs. See, I know that. Now, what I'm saying is that we've got to fix something, because I certainly don't want our young men constantly going off to prison. Because if for no other reason, then I got a lot of nieces and female cousins and female family members that need a man. And where they gonna get a man from if white folks are locking up all the young, viable black males? I'm saying that we gotta start thinking of some way to manufacture something, to service something, to create some financial institutions. I've talked about, we ought to have 10 companies in the United States making $2 or $3 million a year just manufacturing red, black, and green flags. We ought to have plenty more brothers who can do things like this. This is gorgeous. I put this up in Black Expressions bookstore. Ray Overton, who's in our studio audience this evening, did this. He's an artist. He certainly knows how to do artistic things. This is a gorgeous piece of work. As I say, I couldn't afford to have these reproduced in any mass manner because it costs too much money. But I can look at this and tell that this is as professional as you could get. Everybody who saw the pieces that were made because of this have commented how professional they look. I'm saying that we need not just one Ray Overton, we need 1,000 Ray Overtons in one city like Chicago. But we would only need them if we were spending the 36 or 40 billion, that's with a B, 36 or 40 billion dollars that's being spent in the Chicago area, if we were spending it with black brothers and sisters. Now, hold it. I know that you could find somebody to do this and pay them. Brother Overton did this for me. Bono is the legal term. Free is what we would say in the street. And the reason he did it free for Nahaz is because Nahaz didn't have the kind of money that I know companies on Michigan Avenue that do this same kind of thing, and for this one piece they might charge $5,000 or $6,000 to do this one piece. All I'm saying is that somehow, brothers and sisters out there in TV land, we have got to start circling the wagons